Hello. Excuse me. Hopefully that's better. The output was still at, well, too much for the bandwidth to handle, so I had to lower it. But you can't do that whilst you're actually streaming. So, hello everyone. Long time no see. It's been quite a while actually, about a couple of months. But I've been getting a few questions about accessories for IMVU, so we're going to make a couple of simple items for IMVU as accessories and just go through the process of making, texturing, then getting them into the accessory file and then getting them into IMVU. So as it's Halloween, I'll probably do a couple of small themed items. And I just realized that this is possibly the first stream with Blender 2.8. Woohoo! Right, so let's make some stuff. Going to make a set of bolts, neck bolts. Right, so we don't need the cube. Get rid of that. Add mesh cylinder. And we can reduce that. We don't need 32 sides. Thank you very much. Eight should be all right. Yeah, that'll be fine. I'm going to duplicate that. Shift D. Make that one slightly larger. And smush it down. Get our manipulation widgets. In fact, actually, let's get rid of that one, because bolts generally have 6 sides, not 8. So add mesh cylinder 6. Yeah, that's fine. Should really use the widgets to make this easier for and then we should use smoothing. Smoothing, shade smooth. Just did a tutorial on that. Shade smooth. Oh, hi Beetle. Making some Halloween themed accessories. Auto smooth, that we need that to look round, so increase the value. So we've now got a bolt and our nut. Oh, need to increase that a bit more because of that. So 45, 47, there we go. He may. Is it bad? Bad? Slideshow. Yeah, it'll be the time of day. Normally it's okay, but depending on the time of day, it's going to be yes, they are going to be Frankenstein accessories, Beetle. Yeah, it's probably... Let me try adjusting the bitrate. Hang on. I've reduced it by about 50%, so it's now, instead of being streamed at 2500, it's now just 10. Whoops, let's do 2024. This is the UK's potato internet for you. I am doing something in Blender. Oh, making everyone dizzy. Yeah, still a potato internet here. Well, according to Twitch, according to the control panel, it looks pretty stable. So I'm guessing it's going to be Twitch. Well, from here to Twitch looks to be okay. It's just from Twitch out that seems to be... Oh, you saw a thing move without jittering, yes. So we might as well start this project from the beginning. So let's just reopen. So new, general, blah de blah, get rid of that. Right, so that's our default scene. Oh, so that's working now. Okay, so maybe it's just a question of waiting for Twitch to settle down. That must be why you've got to give it a couple of minutes before you actually go live to get the stream in order. So that looks okay so far. So, right, so default scene. What we're going to do is make some accessories for IMVU. Halloween themed, we're going to make some neck bolts. And these are pretty simple to do. So we don't need the cube, so we can get rid of that. Delete. We're going to add mesh cylinder. And we're going to reduce this to 8. Don't need 32. I'm going to add another one. And this one will be 6. And this is the bolt. So we're going to change the size of that. Slightly larger, smush it down. Slightly larger again. and then the bolt, I'll just make that longer. We're making it longer just to cover later on when this gets added to the avatar. We need to make allowance. Let me get my scribbly on screen thing. We need to make allowance for this bottom section or top section, depending on how we orientate the object. We need to make allowance for that to be buried inside the neck of the avatar. Yeah, it looks like, I'm just looking at the control panel, it looks like it's Twitch. But if you have any trouble watching this, or if it's giving you any trouble, just let me know. Right, so smoothing. So we've got our two objects, smoothing, object, shade smooth. We'll do that for both of them. And then what we'll do, because we want hard edges on these, but we want them strategically, object data properties, and we want normals. That's this section. We want to auto smooth, and that's all right at the default at 30. Auto smooth, I need to increase that. 45. Oh, and we've still got some sharp edges, so a bit more. 47. So we've now got a very basic cylinder, which is the bolt, and a nut. Yeah, I'm not quite sure. I think it's really just going to be down to the time of day. I mean, normally when we stream late at night or later, it's okay. I should really be recording this. So shall we start again, and I'll record this and then possibly upload it later on. There's an idea. 3 times a charm. Let's do that. Right, so let me check where this is going to save to. Oh. Doesn't look as though you can record to a different resolution than is currently being streamed. Oh well. How far? Right, so we've got a bolt. Nut and bolt. Depending on how you want this to be textured, we've got 2 choices. We can either join them together and assign the same texture to them, or we can texture them separately, so we have a texture for the bolt and a texture for the nut. Given the nature of these, I guess really we could just join them together. Before we do that though, let's make a copy of them so we've got a point that we can go back to if we make any mistakes. So select, duplicate, duplicate objects, Shift D. Just move them to one side, and that's fine. And then join. So that creates one unified object. So what we need now is a material. Materials, new, call this neck bolts. We've got use nodes. For 2.8 we have to use nodes now. Can't texture objects without this. Oh, well, you can, but they won't work well in IMVU. So what we have to do now is create a material. So we're going to shading. That'll change the workspace. So we've got the shading preview in the top section and the node editor in the bottom section. Yeah. Jinx was on at me for doing that, making some cheesy emotes. Maybe using the avatar's big heads or something. So we've got the preview top, node editor in the bottom, and this is where we basically put the node or the material together. And the materials now are composed of these, well, they're called nodes, but they're basically separate elements for the different aspects of a material. A very simple one, which is what we're going to do here, is just to add a texture, image texture node, plonk that into the workspace, and then what we do is we connect them by clicking on these little circles or connectors, and it'll do things like that. So what we've done there is basically created a very simple material, but we have no texture. So we create a texture, new, width, we want this to be 512, 256, don't need alpha, UV grid, and then OK. And there we have a textured bolt. You can, if you want, go into, well, the next step would be to, so we switch back to layout so we can see our bolt. So we have to switch to, these are our display modes at the top. So we've got wireframe, solid, which is the default, look dev, which is it's the equivalent of textured in the old version of Blender, and then we've got rendered. Thanks for dropping by, Beetle. So our objects are already UV mapped, because when we added them to the scene, it gives us an option to generate UVs, and that's useful for these kinds of simple objects where we don't necessarily need to be doing anything particularly complicated. Let's get rid of that. So we've got our material, we've got our mesh, neck bolts, and it's got a texture. Neck bolts. So what we can do is save the file. Oh, let's take a look at the UV map actually. So select the object. We want to go into UV editing. And that is the UV map for our bolt. So depending on how you want this, if you want to edit your UV maps, you can obviously do that by selecting various elements and making adjustments to them. Or you can just leave the thing as is and we have a usable. So if that were just a rust texture, you don't necessarily need to do anything to that and it'll appear on this object. So we can use that as it is. So file, save as. Wakey computer. Neck bolts. Save. So what we want to do as well is name the object so that we know what it is. Neck bolts. And we do that in object properties. Just save over that. Because what we're going to do next is load in the accessory file and then append this object to the accessory file. So female accessories, drag and drop, open. So that's the female accessory file. Now we append the mesh we just made. File, append. Accessories, neck bolts, object folder, and then we have neck bolts. That's what we want. Append from library. Now this will be super tiny and it'll look like nothing's been imported. But what we can do to check this is, well, we can do two things. We can either look at the outliner, that's this bit. If the object was successfully brought in, it'll be listed in the outliner. We've got ours as neck bolts. But what you can also do is, because of the size difference, what we can do is view, is it align view? It's align view to active. No, it's not that one. Which one is it? Dagnabbit. Just use the shortcut. That's Shift S, S for Simon or S for simple, and it'll bring us up the selection menu. Keep forgetting where that is. And I wrote a tutorial explaining all of this as well. Oh, there we go, it's snap. Is it snap? No, it's not snap. Good gracious. Oh, that was it. Honestly, this is the problem with, this is one of the biggest problems with Blender, is that not only do they change the locations of things, but they also change the name of things. So we could have just pressed numpad period or numpad delete, and that would have done the same thing. But that used to be called something something to selected, but they've changed the language, and it's now called frame selected, or frame all, or frame selected. And that's what all we wanted to do, was just that. So it's going to be super, there it is, really tiny because of the size difference, but that confirms that the object was brought in. So what we need to do now is just scale the object up. So we can press the S key and type a value 100, and that'll just make it super big so that we can see it. Or what we can do in object properties is use the scale values, change those. Whoops. Make sure you've selected the right object first. That's still too small, so let's go 100. That looks a bit squashed. That's okay. So that's our object in the accessory file. So save that. Save as. And we can make some neck bolts. So what we're going to do is switch the widget. That's the universal widget. Rotate, manipulate up to the neck. Scale. So if you want to scale on multiple axes, click anywhere inside the sphere. If you want to scale on a specific axis or axes, click the axes or the colored handles. Move. So we want to focus on that so that we can manipulate the scene better. So that's view, frame selected. And let's play around with the rotation a little bit to make it off kilter. But we can now see why we overcompensated at the bottom, so that we could embed the bolt into the avatar's neck without any gaps. So duplicate that, Shift D, or flip that around. We don't want this to be exactly the same. Probably a little bit too big. So select them both and scale down a little bit. Reposition. Then join them together. In fact, actually, let's save the file. Incremental save, save as. Then join. So select them both. Control J for judge, J for judge. That's both of them joined. Now we need to choose which neck bone we want to use. So let's just hide that for now. Hide the head. Hide that bone and that bone wherever it is. There it is. Oh, and that. So we've got a choice. Don't want to use the head. Want to use one of the neck bones, and the closest one is going to be neck 03. You could use neck 04, but that's not used for much. So neck 03. So select, this is where we parent the objects together. So mesh, we need to create a vertex group. So click the plus button, double click that, rename this attachment root, edit mode. Make sure everything is selected and then click the assign button to assign everything to the mesh, and we can test this with the select and deselect buttons. That's fine. Exit edit mode, object mode. So what we want to do now is assign an armature. So modifier properties, click add modifier, select armature. We want to select our object, or set the object, which is the armature that's going to be the target of the mesh. So we can either select it from the list, or, because there are so many of these things, click the eyedropper and then move over to the armature that we want to select and just click it, and it'll appear as the object's target. So we should now have pose mode. We have to go into pose mode. Pose. So that now controls our object. So let's unhide the torso. Yeah, that looks fine. Object mode. Right, so to export, let's just save the file again. Incremental, save as number 3. So to export this to FBX, some of these items, when exported, don't work properly for some reason. and it only does this with accessories, and I think it's something to do with the number of armatures that are in this particular file. Because it's the accessory file, each bone of the armature has, each bone of the skeleton, the avatar skeleton, has a separate armature associated with it. So that's about 100 and something different armatures, and I think Blender has a problem with that. So what we can do to export this is literally export everything that's in the scene, forcing Blender to include all the contents of the scene, which we can then filter out. So that's what we'll do. And this is the bit that's tricky. This is where people trip up. So once you've got your mesh where it needs to be, so in this case it's the neck bolts, and it's attached or parented to the appropriate bone, which this is now, we can export those to FBX. FBX export bolts 3. So to do this, normally we would select or activate selected objects, but in this instance we want to force Blender to export everything, so we deselect or make sure that that's deselected. Geometries, we can apply modifiers, that's optional, but it's generally left. It's generally okay to leave it in place. Armatures, always disable add leaf bones. And animations, we don't really need this, but so don't need to do anything with these. And then just export. Oh, change your file name if you need to. Blah blah blah. Yeah. Export FBX. So that's the FBX file exported. So next we need IMVU. Oh look, we've got a prize. Make it Fright Night with a free gift. So what we need to do is create mode, create, drive new product. We'll use a female accessory, but it can be the male accessory, doesn't really matter for these. Accessory. Go. So that's the default accessory. So we want to import our FBX. So FBX import. Load FBX. Find our file, which is not on the desktop. Hang on. Whoops. Where did we save that? Ah, right, there it is, neck bolts. So select, open. So this is where people trip up. So we've got, because this has brought in a lot of armatures and there are meshes associated with some of those, we'll get the select skeleton root box pop-up. It'll give us a list of skeletons that it's picked up that are viable for importing into IMVU. And the ones that we want always is the one that starts root node /. So whenever you're bringing in an accessory item, always select the one that says root node. The others won't work. So select that. It'll list the meshes that it finds, and then we can just click the button, configure FBX, and it's brought in our mesh. So for female, mesh ID is always 2. Don't need to do anything for the texture. Apply scale 0.01 and then just import. Blah 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 blah. Yep, that's fine. Import changes, apply changes. So that's got rid of, ooh, it's almost there. So that's replaced the default glasses. So what we next need to do is change the attachment node. This is the target of the armature. Well, yes, it's the target of the accessory item. And in this instance, that's neck 03. Apply change, and there are our bolts. And if you want to assign this to both male and female, comma 191. So 80 is female, 191 is male. Apply changes, whoops. Meshes. And what we can do now is replace the texture. So let's just use something generic. What have we got? Not a lot. So the texture that was so the texture that was assigned in in Blender was wider than it is taller. So it was twice as wide as it is tall. So we'll select the donut one for now. Apply changes, and there are our neck bolts textured. And that is an accessory. So we can save that and upload it to the catalogue at some point. Nice. So let's make another one. So save that. New file. Let's make a witch's nose. So what we want to do for this is start from the accessory file, because we need the avatar as a reference point. So let's add. So what we're going to do is add an object to this scene, but we want to add it roughly where the head is. So we could use the mesh, but the problem is that the mesh, or the origin point for the mesh, is down at the avatar's feet. And when you add objects to the scene in Blender, they are added where the origin point usually is, or where the 3D cursor is. And the 3D cursor is currently at the origin point, so we can't snap as an object, we can't snap the cursor to the head, because the head as an object, its origin point is down at the center. So what we can do is use the armature that's closest to where we need to be. So Shift S, cursor to selected, that moves the cursor. And then add, let's do a cube for this. So that's added a cube, which is super tiny. We can scale that up. And then move it into place. And let's do a bit of, it's very simple, mesh editing. So what we're going to do is switch to edit mode. Going to switch to face select. And then we're going to do a bit of extruding. And extruding is this button. So click that, and then we get this little widget, and just pull on that. Extrude. Extrude. And that'll do. So what we want to do is scale. So we want to scale the end down. Now we want to scale the rest of this. So what we can do, switch to edge select. And then we can do an Alt right click or Alt left click if you've got your left click set as the selection for your mouse. That'll select a loop. So it selects all the edges around the object. And then we can scale that. Do the same again. Scale that. And again, scale that. And then we can do the same again to narrow the top. But we can be selective with this. Shift right click. And we can select specific edges. And then it's just a question of just manipulating the mesh. Switching between the widgets. Changing the shape of things. So we need to add a little bit of structure to this. So we want to split, I don't know if we can see this. We want to split these two edges that are selected so that we can take on the shape of the avatar's nose a bit better. So we select them, and then edge, subdivide, and that splits the mesh, it splits those selected edges in two. We can switch to vertex mode, select those, let's go inside the head. Yeah, that'll do. These things don't need to be too super complicated. Just got to make sure that we make allowance for the object being buried inside the avatar's head. Yep, that looks okay. Object mode, mesh smooth. And what we need to do is delete this face at the back because we don't need it. So shift select and delete. Yeah, perfect. Object mode, need a texture. So materials, new. Which is nose, and again it's using nodes, so we have to switch to, where's it gone? Shading. So there's our nose. Add texture, image texture. We can link those up. So color to base color. Click new. Uh, 512 12 by 256. No alpha, UV grid. Okay. So this does have to be UV mapped because we've extruded some extra elements onto the original object. So what we can do now is switch to UV editing. So that's the Z key or Z key. Look dev. So we're in edit mode, select all, and that is our UV map. So what we can do here, the simplest UV map would be to press the U key and do a let's try a cylinder projection. Oops. So we need to scale that. So scale, click drag, or press the S key if we want to scale in a particular direction. S key, Y. Whoops. G for grab. Yeah, that's not going to work too well. So let's try a box. So U key, cube projection. That'll work. So we need to edit these. We're going to select them by island, which are independent elements, and then manipulate them. So that was the Y key to rotate. The S key scales, and then the G key moves. So this will work. It'll give us a UV map, but it may not be optimal, because if we added a wood texture to this, or a barky wood, what we'll find is that there'll be seams running along these edges, because what we've got essentially is a separate is a set of separate UVs. We want to try and avoid that, so a more optimal approach would be to select some edges and then mark those as a seam. Mark seam. That highlights them orange. So what we can do now is select all, unwrap, and that produces a much better UV map. A bit of manipulation. And if you want, we can stretch this all the way. But with that seam in place, and it being on the underside of the nose, it's less likely to be seen, visible. So we'll get a better texture wrap around this object. So that's our witch's nose. So we now have to turn this into a accessory. Edit mode. Object data properties, vertex group, attachment root, assign, again test, exit edit mode. So we need to hide the head. Hide the attachment root or attachment rig. And what we want to do is attach this to the head bone. So select the mesh, modifiers, add modifier, armature, and again use the eyedropper. Click that and then click on the head attachment. And then we can test this. Select the armature, pose mode, click the bones. So that's the attachment node bone. Click it again and that'll be the attachment root, and there is our mesh moving with the accessory item. So save this, so exit, switch out of pose mode, save. Oh, what do we call it? Net bolts. So witch's nose. Save. And then we do the same thing again. So export. FBX. Oh, let's just check that we've got everything. So we've got a material. Yeah, we've got a material. That's got a texture. We've got a UV map. And it's controlled by the skeleton or the armature. So export FBX, witch's nose. So keep selected objects deselected. Geometry, add modifiers, that's fine. Armatures, always disable leaf bones. Animation, leave those, don't need those. And then export. So, IMVU, new project, close that, new project, accessory, go. Oh, hi boss, didn't see you arrive there. Second Life is better than IMVU? Or less than? No, is that more than? Greater than? So that's our default. Import FBX, load FBX. And this was called witch's nose. So we've got the select skeleton root box again. So remember, select the option or the listing that always starts with root node. Root node gives us our cube, which we forgot to rename, but we didn't need to do that because we were using the accessory file instead of appending. And again, female avatar, so this is number 2. Scale 0.01 and then import. Apply changes. Oh, and it's appeared in place. Awesome, because the attachment node is the node that we were using. So add the male, so that's 191, comma 191. Apply changes. Meshes, we want to add our texture. Again, because this was twice as long as it was high, do nut. And there is our texture. Oh, disable two-sided and use blending. We don't need those. Save the file. and then you upload. Double check this one. Double-sided. Use blending. We don't need those. And then save over the file that we created and then upload that. So if you, when you import something, if you disable two-sided and your object disappears, it basically means that your mesh is inside out. And you can then enable two-sided and have the object shown on screen, but it's best to try and fix that in IMVU, not in IMVU, in Blender, and then re-export your file. So there we have two accessories. We've got a set of neck bolts and a witch's nose. Pretty simple objects to get set up and export from Blender. So how long have we been going for? Ooh, an hour. I wonder if we can get another one in. No, we'll save that for another time, especially because the internet connection has been so choppy, so this stream is probably not going to be oh, hi Notorious. Well, Pinocchio. No, well, yeah, I didn't really think of that actually. No, it's a witch's nose. We just made a couple of accessory items. Made some neck bolts. Neck bolts and a witch's nose. Witch's twist. But these were just accessories because a lot of people seem to have problems with, when using Blender, getting the accessory. Making the accessory in Blender is fine. They have problems getting the accessory from Blender to IMVU. When is Halloween? Is it 31st? Yes, tomorrow. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's going into. I'll probably stick these in the catalogue. Won't do it right now, but they'll be in the catalogue. But it's very simple accessories or very simple meshes. People tend to get too caught up with making their objects really complicated. You don't really need to. Oh no, it's an accessory, so it'll be whatever people texture the thing with. It's not part of the mesh, not part of the avatar. It's the same with the bolts. Those are just ordinary accessories. I don't know. I don't think you can do any skins on accessories. Can you? I don't think you can. So any skins, for those that are wondering, are it's a way of texturing your objects so that they take on the properties of the avatar's skin, if I remember correctly. But to do that, you have to import the items as body part meshes, not accessories. Yeah, someone's probably tried it, but I don't know if anyone's... Yeah, so those, I am guessing, will be body part... what's the... well, they've got the empty clothes. They're the body part products. So you're replacing, you're not replacing, you're adding a body part to the avatar as opposed to, in this instance, it's a mesh for the accessory skeleton, which is completely detached, obviously, from the avatar. I wonder if oh no, I need to make yeah, I'll do it later. I'll do it after the stream. I'll create some icons and upload these. But this was just to go through the process of creating accessories using Blender and exporting them, because had a few people having problems with getting them to work properly. But I'm not sure how well this stream has come through, because we've had problems with it earlier on. Stuttering. No, well, I haven't. We haven't done any streams for a while, so this is the first back from an absence since I don't know when the last stream was. A couple of months. Everyone's been busy. No, no, you don't need to feel guilty. No, No, I have not done streams for a while because of the writing up the tutorials for the Creator Education Centre. And that's basically done for now. The tutorials are not complete. There's still quite a few to do, but the project's done for the moment. But whilst that was going on, just too busy to do streams. But I don't know how this has happened, but the channel has had, in the meantime, 500,000 views, which is it's enormous. It's actually quite surprising how many views the channel has had compared to something like IMVU, a multi-million-dollar company, and we are beating IMVU. Ha ha ha. Not sure what their view number is at the moment. Me goes and has a look. Oh, it's only 340,000. Never mind. Ha! Well, hopefully, we are thinking of doing Creator Mass again this year. So that's the 12 days of Creator Mass. Thanks, Polly. Where we shall have some shenanigans, Christmas-themed shenanigans. But it's still early days for that. Got to do some organising, but that may be happening. So there may be more streams. Right, well, on that note, we'll call it quits because I don't think this stream is going to be as rock solid as it has been in the past. So what I'll try and do at some point, while I'm actually working on these at the moment, is a tutorial or tutorials on creating accessories using Blender 2.8, and those will be available whenever they are available. So on that note, we shall call it quits and look out for future streams coming in the next couple of weeks. So cheerio everyone.